Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name's Jessica Ward King, also known as the Stigma Crusher. And here at this channel, we deal with issues of mental health and mental illness from my twin perspectives as a person with lived experience of bipolar 2 disorder, as well as a person with a PhD in experimental psychology. Sound like your jam? You are more than welcome and we'd love to have you. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and if you would like to be notified each and every week when I post, hit that notifications bell as well. Remember to share widely, like, and comment. I will always comment back. And with that, I guess it's time to start stigma crushing for this week. Today I want to talk about what I strive to teach my son about, well, life, but mental illness and mental health in general. And it's really relevant to me right now. I've been struggling ever since last March, so around the time pandemic started. My son has been struggling as well with anxiety. And it's important that even though he's only 8, I start to teach him these things that I wish I had known, things that I hope he can find useful. So let's have a look at some of those things today. This won't be completely exhaustive. I would love to teach my son the sun, moon, and stars. But let's have a look at a few of the things that I hope are most useful and important for him. Children pick up everything. They are truly sponges. Mine is no different, and I discovered about maybe a year ago or so that he knew the word stigma crusher, and that he knew that it applied to me. And that was round about the time that he started asking questions about mental health and mental illness, and started to, really challenge some of the things that maybe his younger and more naive self had been fed on the topics. So the first thing that I wanted to, in that light, that I wanted to transmit to my son is that there are only good questions, and that he should keep asking them. And keep asking them when they're challenging and when they're hard. And so when he will say to me, well, Mommy, somebody at school said they want to kill themselves. What does that mean? Immediately, I recoil and think, my goodness, my baby, to learn about topics relating to suicide? Surely a child that young can't. Well, Jessica, with the PhD in psychology, knows that children that young indeed can and do have express ideation of suicide, have thoughts of suicide, in some cases even have plans for suicide. Yes, even children that young. And so I want him to ask those tough questions and press me and those around him when he's not getting satisfaction with the answers that he's getting. Because when it comes to stigma and mental illness, the only questions are good questions. And the more we leave these things that we're wondering about, in our heart of hearts, in the dark, the more power they get in terms of stigma. Quite often, I know with my son, it is when we have quietened down for bed, and I'm busy reading a wonderful, positive bedtime story, that these questions will come. I do try to direct questions to come at a more appropriate time, but whenever they come, I try to make sure I answer as best as I can and, defer the rest of the answer to a time that's more appropriate. Another thing that I am desperate for my son to learn and to understand is that the ways that we think and talk about ourselves are important. They're not just words. They're not just schoolyard jibes. They're not just depressed ideas. They are important. And so for him, I know that he's very aware of his anxiety disorder. He would much prefer not to talk about it like that, not to call it anxiety. He's aware that he's somehow nebulously aware that there's stigma around this, and probably mostly from the playground. But he can't control what's said in the playground, but he can control how he applies it to himself. And so to talk about himself as someone who is sick or weak is not something I want for my son. I want him to talk about himself as someone who is strong, someone who is capable, who is fighting, and who is, winning that fight every moment that he gets, every moment that he can. And so, yeah, that's it. That the way we talk and think about ourselves is going to affect everything. And I know with myself, when I was first struggling with mental illness. Oh, who cares? It's been like it was 15 years since I was struggling with mental illness, that I was thinking about myself in stigmatizing terms, and that it caused me no end of problems, no end of horrible feelings, but also of missed opportunities to get treatment. So he needs to learn to think about himself positively, and I'm trying to instill it in him. I want to make sure that my son knows that it's never too early to struggle with one's mental health or mental illness, that it is not, something that is abnormal in him. They don't really talk about it at school. I know that they don't, and I'm working to combat that. But for him to know that he's normal. He's normal. He's normal for all those kids that struggle with anxiety. He is absolutely normal, and he is awesome and beautiful, even while he struggles. It's a short one, but it's something that's really critically important. Words are important. Not just the words we use to talk about ourselves, which I mentioned earlier, but the words that we use in the world to refer to others as well as ourselves. My son, when he started asking questions about mental health and mental illness, I shared with him that the word crazy was not appropriate. And he took that heavily on board. He has said to me many times since, and you know what? Caught me using a colloquialism and saying crazy, saying, "Mummy, you said crazy wasn't an appropriate word." Yes, my son, you are absolutely right. Crazy is not an appropriate word, and neither are a myriad of other words that you're going to come across, my boy. And that there are good words that we can use words that talk about our diagnoses rather than, those words that are kind of more playground words. Which is why I'm trying to get him to accept and use the term anxiety in reference to himself. Stigma has me beat so far, but I'm working on it and making sure that he knows the words that are appropriate and the words that are not. Finally, I guess, the thing that I hope most to impart to my son is that he is not his diagnosis. He is way more than his diagnosis. And that is, really his greatest strength in life. Certainly, being a strong advocate for mental illness would be something I wish for him. But more than that, for him to be a completely well-rounded, three-dimensional young boy, young man, shortly enough, I'm sure, is the desire of my heart. I don't want him to identify with his mental illness so much that it becomes the first thing out of his mouth when he's asked who he is and what is he about. I want to hear instead that he loves jujitsu and parkour and, playing with his stuffies and building Lego. And oh, yeah, I also struggle with an anxiety disorder, but that's quite beside the point. For this one, I have to walk the talk a little bit and stop the sensation of wanting to label myself first, but instead to talk about all those other things that I most certainly and robustly am. So, okay, Jessica, it's time to walk the talk and teach my son that he is not defined by his disorder. Not to be afraid of it or shy of it or stigmatized by it, but not to be defined by it. So those are my thoughts for this week on what I would like to teach or impart to my son on the issues of mental health and mental illness. Wish me luck. It is not easy to parent. Anyone that is doing it knows. And please do comment. What are some of the struggles you've had in parenting your own child, whether with mental health or illness or not? And then also, advice. I'm going to open it up to advice, folks. If anyone's got advice on how to parent a child that is struggling with mental illness, as a person with mental illness, perhaps, please do comment below. I will definitely respond to every comment I see. Well, that's it for this week then. Have a great week, and I will see you all in the next video. Stigma Crusher!